And here we are, Dave
Hey,
Newman.
hello.
Hi, how are you, Dave? Wow, you
We're
are,
so
where
far
are
away
you?
from we're so far away from each other,
Yeah. We're actually a few blocks
right?
away
Can you
in
believe it?
California. And this is, wow, you are right on the beach.
Yeah.
Wow, now,
You think the
beautiful.
wind's blowing?
Yeah,
No
beautiful.
coronavirus here.
Yeah, well, yet.
Love
So
it.
Dave and I have been friends for more than 20 years now. And Dave comes from um, the most important Hollywood film music family. And Dave is the son of Alfred Newman. He's the brother of Thomas Newman. Um, his sister is also composer Maria Newman.
And Randy Newman, the
Randy, of
artist
course,
and film composer, also
and the
Academy Award winner, is part of as my cousin.
right, and
Generations older.
your Lionel or Lionel, I don't know how you say it. It
No,
was the brother.
it's he's Irv. Yeah, and then Lionel was one of the brothers, the youngest brother. But Randy's brother is Irving. He was a doctor, so he was one of the only ones that wasn't a musician. But guess what? He wrote a hit song too. In the
Oh
film.
my God. Okay, so that was
He
in.
wanted to be a songwriter, but my dad said, "You're going to we need a doctor in the family."
And your daughter is a singer, a
Yeah.
fantastic singer who
Yeah.
actually placed in our vocal competition in Dallas a few years ago, and she was in the Ryan Center in Chicago.
Yeah.
She's an amazing singer. She's also a violinist and so on. Um, so let's start,
Okay.
if you don't mind, with your father. So the people who are listening to this conversation, I conversation with a lot of singers, but also with Emmanuel, the harpist of the Metropolitan Opera, who is now going to Los Angeles Philharmonic whenever the Los Angeles is performing
Oh,
again.
because Joanne left. Right, right.
Yeah,
oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's great.
he won the competition.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
now this is an amazing musician and the sweetest guy on earth. Very smart, very sharp. And so let's go a little for the people who don't know exactly your father. Your father was with maybe Steiner and Korngold,
For
the
Congo.
most, the most iconic film composer of a certain area. He changed the way music was articulated with movies and somehow the way the whole production of this genre was thought. It started also with some technical advances. So he invented that machine that synchronized the movie and the music. Can you just explain to the people who are not familiar how that machine works?
Oh, well, that was developed in 1935 at Universal Artists at UA, what they call. Um, uh, let me back up a bit.
Yeah.
It'll explain better if I give you a little background. Um, silent films in the aughts and in the 20s became very mature art forms visually, but music was just pastiche. They used some classical music, sometimes it was piano. There was nothing recorded, so there was nothing permanent in it, and there was generally no score for a silent film. But once films became talkies, what they called in the late 20s, and particularly by 1930, 31, now music was married to the film. So whatever music was composed for the film was going to always be there with the film. So my father was born in 1900. He was a prodigy pianist. He was one of 10 kids, absolutely poverty stricken, lived in a Russian Jewish ghetto in New Haven, Connecticut, but had early on a real talent as a pianist and was studying to be a concert pianist. And so he studied through his teens, but still had to work because he was the only person that could take care of his family. His father was a deadbeat, wasn't around. It was his mother and the 10 kids. So he gradually matriculated to Broadway in the 20s. So he knew Gershwin, he knew Irving Berlin, and
Schoenberg.
Well, he didn't know Schoenberg then. He knew Schoenberg when he came to Los Angeles. But during the 20s, he was essentially a conductor and not a composer. And he was born in the United States. So fast forward 9 years, he's doing great as a conductor in Broadway, making a great living, doing big hit Broadway musicals by this time, and he's asked to come to Hollywood in 1930. So him and Max Steiner arrived within 1 month of each other in early 1930 to do a sound musical, a musical with actual sound in it. And things happened, and little by little, they had to write they came initially to do musicals because Max Steiner was also a conductor on Broadway, but musicals kind of fell out of favor. So then now they were doing dramas and noirs and comedies and, whatever kind of genre. The way film is organized a lot is in different genres. It's a drama, it's a comedy, it's a romantic comedy. It's always been sort of like this. So the other, say, pioneers were Steiner, who was earlier than my dad, but not by much. Franz Waxman, who came in probably around 1933. Dmitri Tiomkin, who was Russian, also around the mid 30s. And then, as you indicated, Korngold came in 1934 to do the Max Reinhardt adaptation of Midsummer Night's Dream, where he adapted all the Mendelssohn music and everything. But they were trying to figure out what music does in a movie. They didn't know what to do. Is it like a play? Do you just have a little overture and then no music, or is it like Mendelssohn's Midsummer Night's Dream? Is it incidental music in between scenes, or is it like silent film where it's all the way through, it never stops? And more important, what they termed in the 30s, was it commentative music? Did they comment on the action or not? Because you can see early 30s music, it doesn't really comment. It might as well be another sound effect. Maybe here and there we'll have a little thing and all that. So the amazing thing is that, maybe it's not so amazing, but if you look at a movie in 1930, 31, just go to IMDb or go to Apple or whatever and say, maybe see the original King Kong that Max Steiner did in 1933. And then you go forward a few years to 1939, you're at Gone with the Wind, Wuthering Heights, Wizard of Oz. You're in an absolutely, totally mature art form. And my father was the only one that was born in America. The rest of them were expats. But it's my contention that without Korngold coming, remember how famous Korngold was in the 30s? He would never have left. Right?
He had written the most famous opera ever, and for years it was the opera that was the most performed in Germany.
Yeah. And why he's only leaving for obvious reasons. He's leaving Austria.
He's fleeing away from the fascism and Nazism. Yes, so he actually didn't like the idea of writing film music at first. This is
what's interesting. He does this adaptation. Then in 1935, he does a movie called Captain Blood, and for some reason, he just happens to be good at it. I don't think he really cared all that much about it.
The craftsmanship was amazing. And he was used at connecting drama, movement, and music in a way that was already a certain kind of prefiguration what film music is about.
But I think all those guys, remember, they're all in this little city. They're all here in Hollywood. They don't really talk to each other. They all have their own music department. Alfred Newman's at UA, Max Steiner's at Warner Brothers, somebody else is at Paramount, blah, blah, blah. They all have their own, they have a full-time orchestra at their beck and call anytime. They have a big cadre of composers, arrangers, orchestrators, copyists, and oodles of money. And so Korngold comes in this mix, and he's this gigantic catalyst. I cannot imagine that year, 1939, would have ever happened had Korngold not get into the mix. Now, this is a long way of explaining what you asked me before. Most of these guys would synchronize a movie with a big clock, with a second hand. They called it a sweep hand clock. And they put in their score at 1.5 seconds, this happens, at 1 minute, 10 seconds, the door closes, and then this they idiosyncratically mark up their scores. but there's a clock, right? So here's the podium. Your orchestra's normally like you're on stage. And to your right or to your left, depending, is a big sweep hand clock. So what are you doing? You're staring at a clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Alfred Newman, being a bit more sophisticated with conducting, because he'd done so much pit conducting, wanted a metaphor of a pit. So what he did was, the screen is all the way in the back of the room. So figure like the screen is like the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And your orchestra is there with you in a pit. And you want to be looking up at your singers or at your orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
He devised this thing where all the synchronizing stuff was done on film with a line that would go from left to right, however idiosyncratic, wherever you wanted it. And then there would be like a flash of some sort to give you like you're off course or on course, and then I'm off course, I'm on, yes, there I am. And they did it, it was invented by a violist in 1935, and all they did was take the film, put it on a long strip, and he made a machine that made a perfect diagonal line, and they just scraped the emulsion off the film. So the line, it just looks like this. And they'd either do it 3 feet of film or 4 feet of film, which is a little bit slower, or 4.5 feet, and then 5 feet of film. You had 3 choices depending on how much time you wanted from the line to go from left to right. And remember, it's not a tempo. It takes the same exact amount of time no matter what tempo that you are in.
Right.
But still, you speak, how important is it to look at your musicians and to have that thing? And that paradigm is still used today. It's done with a computer. It's more sophisticated, but the actual idea has not changed at all since 19.
Right. So how you were saying, there was this question: is the music going to comment, or what's going to be the role of the music with the narration and the whole movie in general? And then there is this new technology that has evolved. How do these things connect each other? And in which way did this machine invented by your father change the way you would compose music? And what was the new role of music in movies? And how did that affect movies themselves?
Yeah, that's a couple of questions.
It is.
You read some of the internal memos of these studios where they're discussing what to do. They would talk about things like this, like, Frederick Delius, the English composer. He was a big deal in the 30s, like the Briggs Fair, and you can hear a lot of Alfred Newman's music in that era with that. So they're discussing like what they're listening to, but they're also discussing, I always think of it as like, how vertical are you going? In other words, how, in terms of commenting on what's going on in your music, are you helping what is going on in the scene? That's sort of what they meant by commenting on it. It's
right.
A pretty abstract concept, because like, you might think of the film music in a film as another narrator in a way. And the narrator in this era and later can be a false narrator or a real, it can have
it can be detached, can be having another angle, it can be critical, right. It can be ironic, and so on. Yeah.
There's a certain energy and something in it that makes it feel like it is commenting, as if maybe an accompaniment or a secondary line is accompanying a film. And that's a rather abstract concept too, but I think the way these guys got to thinking about movies as they watched it be made was that the medium itself became its own almost sentient thing. In other words, you're collaborating with something that is intrinsically non-collaborative, but
right.
You have to collaborate with it.
Right.
And they started to, and this is where all the talking came about, oh, you shouldn't notice the music in a movie.
Right.
That comes from that concept. I don't know if that's true or not true, the veracity of that statement, but that was a through line for all of them.
But that speaks also about the power of the music in a way. because you don't want the music to say too much,
Right.
but that the role of the music is saying a lot. You just don't want people to notice it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which brings, yeah.
Just one more. We were talking about, I have this group where we're talking about Peter Grimes with some singers and young things. And there's a sequence in it, for those of you that know it, in the first act, the Cartier, his name's Hobson, and he has this kind of funny little aria. And then there's a place where the chorus just sings almost single notes while the basses kind of go up chromatically, but underneath it is Hobson's arias music. So this is all the time in opera. The music is saying so much, and the singers are, I mean, music isn't hegemonic in film like it is in opera, but let's not forget, I mean, film does have a relationship. I mean, opera is what came before that was the most, arresting visual art form. And you can make a case that maybe movies aren't an art form. I would make the case that they are.
They are definitely an art form, and there are good movies and there are horrible movies, and there are good operas and there is horrible music. I mean, what it brings to mind to me, this connection, in opera, as you say, we have the libretto, the dramatic situation, the vocal line, the words of the vocal line, the orchestration, the staging. Now you even have the subtitles, which are adding another line that the brain is following there. And those lines, they might go all in the same direction for the entire object, but sometimes it goes in contradiction, it goes dialectically and so on and so on. So the status of the music is extremely powerful, because even if you don't notice it, this is what is driving the emotions by definitions and the colors. So it can really change the meaning of a scene. What comes to mind when you talk about the evolution of technology and music itself, it has been the same thing for opera in a very deep way. When there were the first gas lamps in theaters, you all of a sudden could not have those marvelous paintings that would change from scene to scene and that would be lit by candles, that would give you a certain approach to the decor, to the sets. And you could move, from a beach in somewhere in a Greek island to another thing, and you would have a certain pace doing this, and the beach would have to be imaging and would be stylized because it was in the shadows. Once you had those gas lights, you were obliged somehow to have more concrete furniture on stage. You could not be as abstract, or you could not leave it so much imagination. And poco a poco, then you move to electric light. You change the type of possibilities in the sets. You cut some possibilities, you create new possibilities. In the end, that changes the type of stories you are going to tell.
You're absolutely right, Emmanuel.
And that changes the music too. So you go from Baroque to realism to romanticism, and you go back to abstraction with new technologies.
And you can go you can look at technologies, the word in an even broader way, where you could go back to late medieval music and Renaissance music that's unable to modulate because of the harmonic series, and then them tempering the scale, and then the profound difference that the ability
revolution
to and definitely with film in the 30s, it was leaps and bounds. The technology was changing every year, if not every month. And again, they had so much money, they just buy all the latest stuff.
So there is also the business aspect, there is the economical aspect, the financial aspect, which is like opera in many ways. Those big shows, they are supposed to impress a certain type and category of the society. For many years, we are trying to change that. We're trying to be agents of change for that, but that was part of the history of music. I mean, this economical aspect that has driven the movies from the beginning, but it has taken proportion now that varies strong, you know. So that's where the question is, movie and art. Of course, the answer is yes. Is that art right now in its best situation or not?
This is the thing that blows people's brains, is the commerce versus art. I mean, how could it make so much money and be art? I mean, it's just not part of our kind of postmodern, you know, it's not intuitive to our brains for some reason. Now, they all felt that. I mean, the arts community, even the expatriate arts community in Hollywood in the 30s, just were vicious about film and film music. Even though they would have loved to have made the money that you would make writing a film score, most of them, except of all people, Schoenberg.
That was the smartest of all, in a way.
He loved teaching, and he was the least closed-minded about stuff. I mean, he did try to write. He did have a meeting with Irving Thalberg, who was an early mogul at MGM, and he said, you know, demanded complete control of the entire film. I mean, something that's just was ridiculous and
absurd. Yeah.
But that's a dichotomy. Or I don't know what the best word is. How does that work? Commerce versus art, you know?
Well, and it probably can work, you know, and history has been working in various dialectical, you know, and proportions with those things. Let's go back to you. So you were educated in this incredibly musical family with your father that probably you saw as someone who was a genius. I mean, did you understand how extraordinary he was? You didn't know that, no?
No, it took me, and I would say Tom too, my brother. We're very close. We're about 18 months apart. He's 18 months younger. So what ended up on our house is everything I did, he did. I mean, this is the way you brought up children when we were growing up. My dad just sort of kept to himself. He was pretty elderly by the time we were old enough to even have a conversation. He was on his third marriage. He was pretty sick. He died in 1970, right before I turned 16. And Tom had just turned 15, I think. So it was only when I got into college and I was basically just practicing the violin all day. That was conservatory training. I mean, you basically did nothing else but practice the violin and playing in an orchestra, and the rest of it was just kind of nothing. I started listening to a lot of his stuff because I had a lot, and that's when I started thinking he was a genius.
Right.
I really think I can defend it too.
Oh yes.
There are things in that he was able to accomplish that were I don't even see how it's possible he could get people to play the way in the style. Not that anybody would want to play like that now, but in that era, there's no orchestra.
There's a sound. There is a efficiency technically and connected to art that was extraordinary. You know, I mean, and probably was he very mindful? Let's go back to this economical and financial aspect. Was he very mindful of how much money you would spend doing a movie, or would he say, "I don't like it, let's redo it again"?
He ran 20th. I always think of my father as a trifecta, right? He's a composer, which he had to learn to do. He didn't know he wasn't a composer in 1930. Right. He had to learn how to compose. Conductor, which was where he spent most of his 20s. And an administrator. And I think almost the most brilliant thing about him was his ability to be an administrator. That means being an orchestra builder. All the stuff you're doing. This is not generally in the wheelhouse of an artist. To be a great, to know when to bring down the hammer, to be clear about what your job is, and then get out of the way. And then if you don't do your job, you're gone. You know, you could fire anybody at any time. So there was no union. You know, this is good and bad. It's wonderful in the hands of somebody that respects the process and the musicians and everything. On the other hand, it's horrible in most hands. Most people just do not know how to deal with that. But he's in charge of the budget. He's in charge of, just like you said, do we redo something? He's in charge of the music prep department, which, as we know, as conductors and players, I mean, nobody gets that. I mean,
Right.
you have to have some horrible screw up in your score or your part or something to realize how important this is, and in film, doling out all the other films that all the other composers have that are on staff. Everyone's hired on staff. They're not working elsewhere. They're not freelance. They're working for him. And when he got to Fox, that Daryl Zanuck ran Fox for those years, he didn't report to anybody but Daryl Zanuck. And Daryl Zanuck loved my dad and basically said, do whatever you want. He basically had complete
trusted him.
autonomy for 20 years.
Right. That orchestra, the Fox orchestra, was absolutely extraordinary and was on par, if not better, with the best orchestras in the world in the time. Why was that? Was it because of the pay? What was it?
Alfred Newman. I think he's just a good, like you are. He's a good orchestra builder. No, you are a wonderful. I watched you. I watched all those years in Spoleto.
Charleston,
yeah. Some people are good at building orchestras. Most conductors aren't, but there are some that are really, really good at it. I mean, we all know who they are.
Right.
They're not always the nicest, greatest people, but
So you had this amazing family figure, although it took you time maybe to realize how important he was, and he is. But you were trained, classically, I mean, harmony, contrepoint, and playing the violin. And then you started playing professionally the violin. You even played in studios. You don't talk much about this. What did you do?
I played for 10 years. I probably played in 400 or 500 movies and television shows. I made a living. That's how I made a living. In my 20s, I did no composing. I played violin by day, and I took conducting lessons from this guy that I loved, that had studied with Leon Barzan, who had studied with, who had been Toscanini's violist. And that's all I did. I would spend about 8-9 hours a week with this one guy, and then I'd work. And that,
right. So for the record, Dave is not only this amazing film composer, more than 100 movies, but Dave is also a very accomplished conductor and really a terrific conductor. And I suspect I can say this because now we are in public, but sometimes Dave asks me questions about conducting. I think they are just bogus question. He knows the answers. He wants me to feel good. No, you do.
No. I mean, come on. Conducting opera is like insane. I mean,
right. No, it is insane.
About conducting VC d'arte. How can you figure it out if you've never seen anybody do it?
Right. I mean, yes, it can be tricky. But you are doing a lot of this now, live film music. So the idea is that
live orchestra,
yeah. So you have a live orchestra. The original music is taken away from the movie, and the live orchestra play. I have seen a lot of these with you at the Hollywood Bowl. This is super exciting. You have done this also with the Chicago Symphony, the New York Philharmonic, Philadelphia, and of course the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and all the best orchestras in the world. Being a violinist and even having that live in the studio, being fascinating by conducting, how did you know you could compose, and how did you come to composing film music?
Yeah, I bet it was the same trajectory as my father, and I didn't really think about this till I was kind of a late bloomer in all this stuff. It takes me a long time to figure out what I'm thinking. It took me a long time to learn how to compose, and I don't feel I have learned how to compose, which I guess is a good thing, where I felt I got to a certain place with the other things, a little bit different dynamic. But it took me a good 5 or 6 years of struggle, some huge mistakes. And I worked with somebody else that was a composer initially, and it really helped me. And I think that's what my father had worked with a very famous arranger in the 30s, actually two of them. And I think that's where he learned how to
But
compose.
you must get the first opportunity. So how did that come? You just say one day, well, let me try, I can do this?
Yep.
Yeah.
And at that time, you had to be trained to be a film composer. You had to know it wasn't as wide
You had
open.
to show credentials of some sort?
No, you just have to be able to read and write music and write it down. So see now,
Right.
now.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
Technology,
Yeah.
it way opens it up. There were not very many people that were vying to do it when I started in the middle '80s. So it was a decision for me. There wasn't a calling. I just thought I didn't want to. I knew I wasn't going to have a conducting career. It just wasn't going to happen because I didn't do the right stuff and study with the right people, and I don't like traveling but so I made a decision to do this because I didn't want to play violin the rest of my life either. And so little by little I learned, and I got better at it, and I got to a point where I got pretty good at it, to where I could do a reasonable amount of output that was reasonably good. But it took me, and orchestrating it just drove me crazy. It just was not natural for me. I learned more about orchestrating from humiliation than from anything else. Humiliation,
just trying things and put, yeah,
it's
making mistakes.
You never make the same mistake. I failing and humiliating were really how I learned how to orchestrate and compose, because it's so awful when it's wrong,
Right. So that's true for any composer, I suppose. It's just that the tempo, the pace of writing in film music is extremely fast. Could you explain to the people who are not familiar with it, what's the process with the timing, and how do you do a score, and how much time do you have, and what are the several steps?
It's of course very variable, and it's changed dramatically from when I started. But you go and you look at a film, you sit down with the director, you say, okay, we're going to start music here, end music here, and you go through the entire film and what's called spotting, which would be like taking the whole film.
Which is a very important discipline.
Very, very, very important. But just think of it this way. When music comes in, it's a seismic event. And when music goes out, it's a seismic event. It's like when the orchestra stops playing in an opera and it's just a cappella for a while, it generally is very jarring and means...
Right.
Okay.
And it tells something.
It tells something. So you have to be very careful where you go in and where you go out. For instance,
is it your decision or is it the director?
It's varied. Sometimes it's the director. Sometimes you say something. Sometimes you try something. It doesn't work. Just in the simplest term, let's say you have two characters. You have a man and a woman, right? If you start the cue on the man, it tends to make the scene about the man for our little 8 minutes, right? You start on...
This is the music of the guy you see first, and it stays attached to that character.
I think our brains just want to work in story. And music, of course, is ultimately abstract. Even when it does have a text, there's an abstract quality to it. So you have to learn a little bit of the syntax of how film music works. So you learn where to go in and where to go out. Okay. Then you make a big list and you just start in. And it used to be that you would write. They'd want a theme for a character and an event.
Right, a leitmotiv.
Now they tend to not want it, but we used to sometimes you'd write a theme devoid of any visual image. Mostly you would write, when I started at least, because it was on VHS tape, you'd write a scene that had the theme in it and try to get the theme approved. And then once you got the theme approved, as you said, you'd use it. You use compositional procedures. You use little parts of it, or elongate it, or do whatever you need to do to write it. and then you might write a theme for another character or event, and then you build your score based on that in some kind of unified way. That's much different now but that's how it was when I started. And then you'd write the music, and then you go and record it all, and then it gets all mixed, and then it goes into the film where they.
Well, but even when you record, you have to adapt. I mean, there are your mistakes. Then there is maybe the director was there and said, "I want it a little more blue. I want it a little more red."
There is that, but it's also, you know, when you do an opera premiere, it's same
Yes.
thing. I'm sure the composer comes and says, "Could we do this?" Or they rewrite something.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't necessarily have somebody, you know, where it's so hierarchical that whatever that guy says you have to do, because the composer is going to be the most hierarchical. So there is that element in film. But most of what I change and what most of us change is things we want to change. It doesn't come from you know, that orchestration, it's too dark, it's, you know, and you learn very quickly how simple it is to profoundly change something.
Right.
You learn all these tricks of doubles and, you know, like really simple ideas: high, low, fast, too slow, too fast, too high, too low, too dark, too light.
You push those buttons and boom, you can recalibrate.
And then you just fold it into your thing and do it. That's actually really fun, because you don't have to write the whole thing over again. You know, the worst is when, if you've really screwed it up, then
right. I experienced at my very humble level something like that, because, you know, I mean, conductors used to be composers. I studied harmony, contrepoint, but I didn't study composition, and I wish I had studied composition. But I had to do, when I was recording with Anna Netrebko, her first album, there were a few songs, Russian songs actually, that were orchestrated by a guy, and I don't know where the guy was coming from, but she heard the orchestration. There was Rudolf Villaume, the most important concert hall in Prague, $4,000 for 2 hours, you know, and Deutsche Grammophon, all the team and so on. He says, "I don't like the music."
Yep. The arrangement.
So everybody just comes and say, "Fix it." Yeah. And all of a sudden, I had to think a composer. And as a good conductor, you have to think like a. So I said, "Okay, take that line off. You double that line. You pianissimo here. You change the thing." And in an hour, it was another piece.
Yep.
And you would have told me the day before, "She doesn't like it. Can you rewrite it? She thinks it's too heavy." I said, "Well, no, I cannot do this. I don't know how to do this." I had so many guns on my head that I did it. Well, and in the end, she said, "You see, that's much better. That's what I want."
That's the thing, Emmanuel. All of us are trained. If you're trained in music, you're trained in composing. You just have to have the, there's more or less experience. But, you know, you have to write the exposition of a fugue. You have to take dictation. You have to.
Yeah.
If somebody put a gun to your head and said, "Write music," you'd write music, you know? Maybe it would be good, maybe it wouldn't be good. But I guarantee you it would get better. Well, it would get better and better and better.
Yeah.
Anybody, in my opinion, that is a trained musician could figure out how to write music if they have the you-know-whats to do it. And
right.
Another thing, like what you were on, but I've had some of my best experiences are just what you're saying.
Right.
Like I remember this film I did called Galaxy Quest, which was a spoof of Star Trek, the Star Trek.
Right.
In the last cue, in the whole film, the culmination of the film was this cue, and I had mocked it up for them with my samples, played it for them, and they said it's fine. And then when we got to the session, it was the last thing in the evening, and it had to be done that evening. It was like 9 o'clock at night. "No, we don't like it." So the directors, and I knew they didn't like it. It was a little too plodding. It was too much of this. So I knew it needed to be sped up. But speeding up, what does that mean? That means I need more bars.
You have less music, yeah.
Yes.
So you do repeats.
Well, you do a repeat of this, then you elongate this. You
Yeah.
give this to this. And I had a full course there. I had 80-piece in course all there in the orchestra. And I sat at the piano. They gave me an hour, luckily, you know, because what are they going to do? And I sat at the piano with the score and with my guys around me, you know, or
So
like
you guys explain to the
copies.
people what yeah,
You know,
what's your guide?
Do this,
Yeah.
the copies. Go give the horns that. And then I sit at the piano and say, okay, guys, play bar 10 to 20. Play it. Okay, now we go from bar 20 to 40. And so, you know, it was one of the most thrilling evenings I've ever had. And of course,
Sure.
it was terrifying. But that is, it's the same experience that you had.
Well, and it's Mozart having to finish an overture in the night for the opening next day. I mean, which is so. You say in the movies, the big guy is the director somehow, you know, and some of them have a musical sensitivity, and some of them don't, but they think they do. What do you do in that case?
I've learned, we've all learned this. You try to steer the conversation away from music. You try to have a conversation about the drama, the shot, anything that is their brains can process. It's hard enough for musicians to talk about music with each other. It's just a dead end to talk about. And if somebody is just, you know, doing that where they're trying to show how smart they are with music, you just try to gently gear it into talking about story, things that are that we human beings can have an easier time talking about it. But as the composer, you listen very, very carefully to what they're saying, the intonation of their voice, what they don't like.
What they're looking.
It's very good to know what they don't like, because it's really easy for them to say, "I don't like that."
Mm-hmm.
They can. They don't have to explain that they don't like that. They just don't like it. If they like it, then they have to sort of explain. I guess if they said they like this, that's good information too. But the best information is, I don't like that, so you don't go down that rabbit hole, because you go down these rabbit holes where you start down a thing and then you just back your way out and start over again.
But some directors are amazing, and the best movies have been done. You know, you cannot think of Spielberg without John Williams, and John Williams has done a lot for Spielberg, maybe more than the other way around. I don't know about this, you know. And I mean, your father worked with Hitchcock. He worked with so many iconic. You have worked a lot, I think, with Danny Devito, correct?
Yeah.
And so how was that collaboration, and how did that come about?
His is a weird career because he's still so famous. He's still a celebrity. And there was a time in the late 80s where he directed, I think, 5 or 6 movies, and then the whole world sort of changed. And he became, I think, less interested and started acting. But he was fantastic to work for. First of all, I don't know if this is the wrong thing to say. He's really Italian. He loves opera, and he loves theatrical, weird, angular. His movies are a combination of weird, angular, dark, funny elements, you know, that are just great for music. It's like you can just do a lot. You know, I was talking about commentative. You can comment a lot more in a Devito movie, and it doesn't overwhelm the movie. So like I did, look, for instance.
And he's looking for that. He wants something that's going to sparkle around.
He just loves the giant thing. There's a cue. There is a cue in Matilda that it's the Roald Dahl story of the girl that has horrible parents, has magic powers, meets a teacher that she loves. The teacher is being oppressed by the principal of the school, who happens to be her aunt, who happens to have killed her father. And basically Matilda goes and saves this woman, Miss Honey. It's like a Dickens story. And Matilda's like a knight errant, and Miss Honey is her lady. And she's going to go out like Don Quixote, and she goes to this woman's house in the middle of the night, and she haunts the house because she can move objects. And she knows that this bad aunt is very superstitious. So there's like an 8-minute scene with music that I've never been able to ever write anything like it. It's a giant, I'd say, tour de force piece in the middle of a movie with basically no dialogue. Just sound effects. It's got all kinds of again, it's a leitmotif. It was a time when there were themes, so it's a leitmotif movie. So I have all kinds of things going. I could never do that in a movie that wasn't like a Devito movie with all these different angles and the rich kind of color texture of it, and the way he shoots this evil, the evil aunt and this beautiful little girl Matilda, and everything's from her point of view, and it's always looking up, and it's it's stuff.
But so would Danny comment what he wants from you, or he trusts that you will get it, or
he doesn't talk very much, but you get a language going. I had another experience with him, apropos to yours. The first movie I did with him was called Throw Mama from the Train, and I did the main title. And it's a stranger. It's based on Strangers on a Train, the Hitchcock movie. It's sort of a spoof, but it's pretty dark, the movie, and I wrote a kind of dark Herman-esque, Bernard Herrmann, who wrote all those.
Yeah.
And it was during the opening scene where Billy Crystal has writer's block. He keeps saying the night was, and he can't think of a word, and it keeps cutting, and he's distracting himself and procrastinating. And so I wrote this thing, and it was too dark. And it's a little too big and too dark, but it was okay. We recorded it, and it took him about 3 days to say, and he said, I don't like that, the main title. I don't know what's wrong, but I don't. So I did this thing. I talked to him a little bit about it. I said, maybe we're missing a little bit of zaniness or something else. But what was really happening was the music was not allowing the audience to laugh. You can't make an audience laugh with music, but you can screw it all up with music. You can make it so they don't
you can forbid the laugh, because you give the mood, and no, you don't laugh at a funeral.
I went back as I was very early on. I got very upset. It was very scary. I'd hardly had any background. The producers had never wanted me on the film anyway. Danny got me on the film. They would have loved to have fired me. But I got interested. I went back. I sat down. This is when I was writing on the piano, and I was orchestrating everything myself. And I sat down, and I got interested, and I really figured it out. And in the end, he thought I was a magician, that I could change. Just like you said, how different it is doing things.
And so what did you do in that case? Did you make the music more ironic?
That's what I did. I started off with a figure, and I used a 2-octave like Stravinsky woodwind motive. That was, and then I built it, and then I started using toy pianos and toy percussion instruments while still using this dark Herman-esque motive that I used. And then I sculpted it a little bit more, because as I said, it keeps jump cutting. He keeps saying the night is cut, and then he goes, and he's walking around, and then he keeps sharpening his pencils. There's just a shot of him taking a minute to sharpen pencils. Anything that one would do to procrastinate because they don't know what they have writer's block. The whole movie is about him having writer's block. Right. But it was. I learned more in that encounter than I learned in the 8 years up to that I'd been trying to do it.
And in the end, he bought it.
It was a miracle. So I worked on all his subsequent films. That's what you wanted to do. You want a relationship with
so you right. So that is fascinating. And you were alluding to the fact that the way you had this work, it was like you had this music like Stravinsky puppets, moving and falling. One of the most fascinating, probably for a film composer, are animation movies, because the music has a status that is huge in this. And you have done Anastasia, you have done some of those
Ice Age, yeah.
Ice Age, and so on. How is it different in the process?
It's what you said. Things happen faster, so there's a little bit more of a technical challenge synchronizing. But what you said, you can do a lot more. It handles a lot more music because you're suspending reality anyway, more than you are in a realistic film. So
right.
And another thing when you write film music is you watch, of course, the movie over and over again, much more than you would as a consumer, and you see the great artistry of these guys, the detail that they put into these characters. I just did a Netflix season of a show that Ellen DeGeneres is the producer. It's called Green Eggs and Ham. There were 13 20-minute episodes. And I think one of the episodes, it's like episode 9, the two main characters are in a tree house that one of the characters has built. This amazing tree house. And they sit next to facing each other, and for 7 minutes they talk. And it has been set up for all the episodes before. It's very important what they're talking about. And the way that it's shot, their facial expression, the nuance with which they go through this dialogue scene, the way it builds, the nuance in it, you can only do something like that. Well, not only, but animation is really good at doing.
Yeah, and the music is explaining all the internal word, all the things that probably words would not say.
Somebody says something and then there's a pause,
Right. And what
it has to keep going for the reason I said you can't stop and start in something like that.
Right.
It has to be through composed. But somebody says something, somebody reacts, it cuts to the reaction. Then it cuts back maybe to the person that said it. Then it maybe cuts back to the other person and he says something. And as I said, in the story, it's been building up, and you create and you're using stuff because this is a theme movie. You're using material that you've heard before, but you're developing it. You're elongating it. You're harmonically moving it around.
Right.
What we just call composer procedures. So
right.
Fugue is a procedure. A sonata form is a procedure. A rondo is all these forms that we learn. They're just ways for composers to write music. So it's a simple way to describe it as a procedure.
Right. Okay, so we were talking about the evolution of technology and the type of writing and the evolution of the aesthetic of our art forms. I mean, same thing for opera than film music in many ways. Connection with the financial, the business aspect of all of this. We are living quite an extraordinary time, which is affecting our industry, dramatically. And we can perform, and as we were saying, the stage is moving to the screen, and the screen is actually the only stage nowadays, and we need to have a lot of activities online. Concerts online are very limited. We can just give some of our past content, we can do some of those, I hope, interesting talks, we can do 2 people, but put a full orchestra together to record anything, live or not live, this is never going to have this kind of human breathing together in space and time with a certain temperature and a mood in the room. So we are craving to go back to the concert hall. And how is this crisis affecting your industry? Are you asked to still write music? Is canned music with a synthesizer going to be the only solution to that?
No. I think the way films are done, they're in 3 parts, like so much in life. 3, right? Father, Son, Holy Ghost.
Yes.
There's pre-production, production, and post-production. So a lot of the stuff was done before March. I guess pretty much everything shut down in March, I think, for us, for film. So there's a lot of stuff that's in post-production. So like I'm working on the 2nd season of this Green Eggs and Ham, they're animating and they have stuff so I can write. Now I can't record anything,
Right.
but I mean, I suppose.
Are they asking to record, find ways to record? No. Are they telling you, oh, you could do it, with those
Yeah.
funny sounds you have in your piano?
Oh, no. No one's
No.
asking. But
Okay,
they
good.
are doing where people are in their own room. There's a lot of thought going into it, but honestly, once there will be a vaccine for this and
Sure.
everything, I think it's like the electricity's gone off. As soon as there's a vaccine, it's like turning the electricity back on.
No. The only question is when is the switch going to be able to go on?
How long can you survive without?
And our industry, I think, is going to be affected by this. I think some companies are going to die. Some orchestras are already dead. And when an institution is dead, it's very, very rare that it resurrects. And so we will have to rethink some of what we're doing. I personally don't think we will be able to go in theaters where you have an audience one row, an empty row, and just another row, and two empty or three empty seats. That cannot happen.
Who's gonna want to go? It's an elective thing.
Nobody.
People have to go.
And how can you make that work economically? And how can you have an orchestra with social distance in the pit? The definition of the pit is that if you don't take your deodorant in the morning, you're out because you're so close to each other.
Yeah.
So it has to be.
I really think that I'm fairly optimistic. I mean, I wish this had been handled differently. It would probably have been better. But I really think that devoid of a vaccine or some palliative, some miracle thing that we're hopefully we'll all have enough to survive. Because once that happens, it just turns. If you're alive, it turns back on.
But so the writers' strike, for instance, in Hollywood has changed the way your business has operated somehow. It did affect the economic model after that and some of the production. Do you think we're going to have something similar?
No, well, I think rather than the writers' strike, it was the timing of the writers' strike. It was the financial meltdown and then the commandeering of the film industry by corporate America. I mean, as you probably know, the most interesting stuff going on in visual media is not movies. It's television. It's streaming.
Yes.
God, to me, the most interesting movies now is doing these live concerts. That is a fascinating thing that is going on almost every orchestra all over the world. I find whatever that portends to be a really interesting thing.
And you are the conductor to go to for those, by the way. I mean.
But I mean, just the concept of it that there's a certain resonance in the audiences seem to like it. I mean,
they love it. They're excited. It's like they are writing the movie again with you, and they are writing the movie in a very different way.
It's a matter of the orchestras themselves, the artists, administrators figuring it out, how to present it and what to do with it and all that. That was in the middle. I just think that'll turn back on again when this happens, because that's an easy way for them to make money. I think the film, most people in film can survive, and animation can go on, obviously, because you can do that off site. And I mean, I don't. It's hard to predict, and it is terrible. I mean, and the way we in the States have handled it is nothing short of scandalous. But I mean, it's not like it was much better in Europe in most countries, and so it's very. What are you going to do? I mean, it's horrible.
Right.
But I do. Yeah. There is a huge incentive, financial and otherwise, to find a cure. I mean, whoever finds a vaccine, if it is a private, I mean, that's billions and billions of dollars. So that's
sure.
To be what makes our world go around.
So Dave, if unfortunately this vaccine doesn't come for a year or a year and a half or 2 years, you will have an opportunity to write symphonic music or an opera. Where are you with this?
I've toyed with writing an opera. I started it I set it up kind of wrong. I, I, uh, I need to get a little. I got about 20 minutes into this project. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I want to say what it is, but I I just didn't go. I had a few false starts, and I ended up liking my original start better because I knew more where I was going. But I have weird taste in it too. I tend to like really dark, weird stuff, and I don't know how. So I would like to do it. I'd love to write something for Diana, for my daughter, as you said, is a marvelous soprano.
Beautiful.
She worked with you in Magic Flute, didn't she, at Dallas?
She was in the Magic Flute in Dallas. She was the first lady, brilliant first lady, and the cover for Pamina. Yes.
Right. We missed that because
you had a movie to write.
No, there was a fire. There was another fire.
Oh,
remember?
Right. There was a fire. Yeah.
Um,
But so you have written. You have written a few symphonic pieces and so on. Isn't that an element that you want to develop?
I'd really like to write an opera. I wrote a few chamber pieces for Diana, which I liked. Actually, I can listen to them. I mean, you know me. I wrote, you were kind enough to commission something for me. And
it was a wonderful piece, which was connected to your father, actually.
It was, and you allowed me to do it in Charleston.
Well, we played it for the people viewing. We played it in Chicago in Grand Park. Big success. That the orchestra loved it. The audience loved it.
So I'm. It's hard for me to listen.
Typical composer. They don't like your music. Mozart was like that.
Is it hard for you to listen to your performances? I can't.
Oh, I can't. I can't. The Tosca we just did at the Met.
That was great.
Now 2 years ago. Yeah, you liked it. I can't listen to it. The other day, I was listening to. We were having a conversation with our contractor, but we're rebuilding the house, and he was in his car and he listened to some music, and I said, "Oh, I know that piece." And I said, "Oh yeah, this is that piece." And I said, "Well, that's great. Great. Oh, here, rubato. Oh my God, interesting. The orchestra is good," and so on. That was my recording.
There you go.
So the only way I could like it is not knowing it was mine. And actually, I really liked it. You would have told me it was mine, I would have hated it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the day we like it, it means it's really not good, Yeah. Dave, I think I see the clock. The clock has moved. This is always fascinating talking to you, and you are, in many ways, you are this connection with, through your father, but also through your own taste between our classical world, either by what you do with all those symphony orchestra or by your knowledge and your craftsmanship. And it's always a great, great pleasure to talk to you.
So appreciate it. I can't wait to see you in Dallas and everybody in Dallas.
Yes, and we can't wait to have you in Dallas. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Emmanuel.
You have a good day.